Everybody. It's wonderful to see you all. I'm Valerie Smith, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to the annual McCabe Lecture, a highlight of Garnet Weekend. In a few moments, two of our McCabe scholars will introduce you to this year's speaker, Jenny Rickard, a member of the class of 1986. Jenny is CEO and president of Common App, a not-for-profit organization committed to the pursuit of access, equity, and integrity in college admissions. I know I, for one, and I'm sure all of you, are looking forward to hearing her insights on this important and timely topic. But let me begin with a few words about Thomas B. McCabe, for whom this lecture is named. Thomas B. McCabe, a graduate of Swarthmore's class of 1915, was chairman and CEO of Scott Paper Company, chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, and public governor of the New York Stock Exchange. Thomas McCabe believed deeply in the value of education, and he was widely honored for his contributions to the field. During his lifetime, he received honorary doctoral degrees from 15 colleges and universities, including Swarthmore. President Harry S. Truman awarded him the Medal of Merit for his contributions to education, business, and government. Here at Swarthmore, McCabe's name, vision, foresight, and generosity endure. Generations of students have studied in the Thomas B. and Jeanette L. McCabe Library and have enjoyed the serene beauty of the Scott Outdoor Amphitheater, a gift from Mr. McCabe. The inaugural McCabe Lecture, established in Thomas McCabe's honor, was held in 1986. Since then, the lecture has reflected his commitment to education and his belief in young people's potential to make their mark on the world. To that end, he also established the McCabe Achievement Award Scholarship Fund in 1952, which has awarded scholarships to more than 300 Swarthmore students since then, many of whom are here today. I'm delighted to introduce you to two of our current McCabe scholars, Zed Ali and Brandon Archer. Zed Ali is a sophomore at Swarthmore studying political science and religion on the pre-med track. This year, he is serving as secretary of the McCabe Scholars. Born and raised in Houston, Texas, Zed is an active member of his community and is nationally recognized for his work in food insecurity, politics, and research on the intersection between race and religion. Besides his involvement with the McCabe Scholars, Zed is a news writer for the Phoenix, an intern for Children at Risk's Center for Child Health Research and Policy, and a hospice volunteer for the Athena Institute. Brandon Archer is a sophomore at Swarthmore with a special major in English literature and Black Studies, minoring in educational studies. Here at the college, he serves as president of the McCabe Scholars, an executive board member of the Afro-American Student Society, member of the Writing Associates Fellowship, and researcher regarding global indicator development and violations of student activist rights. He has been recognized nationally for his commitment to racial justice and community organizing, from his co-founding of the Philadelphia Black Students Alliance and political campaigning, to his recent appointment as executive director and board member of UrbEd, Inc., an education policy and advocacy nonprofit. Please join me in welcoming Zed and Brandon to the stage. Thank you.
It is our pleasure to introduce our speaker, Jenny Rickard. Jenny Rickard is President and Chief Executive Officer of Common App, a nonprofit membership organization committed to the pursuit of access, equity, and integrity in the college admissions process. Founded in 1975, Common App serves more than 1,000 member colleges and universities worldwide and over 2 million students annually. Since Jenny joined Common App in August of 2016, the organization has expanded its access initiatives, including the acquisition of Reach Higher, the college access and success campaign founded by former First Lady Michelle Obama during her time in the White House. In addition, the organization launched a new application system for transfer and adult students, and thanks to a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, built an equity data warehouse to enable stakeholders, including school counselors, college admissions professionals, and external researchers to better understand and support the students that they serve. Under Jenny's leadership, Common App has expanded from 700 members to over 1,000 colleges and universities worldwide, and has increased the number of applicants it serves by nearly 40%. In recognition of Common App's efforts to eliminate systemic barriers in the college admissions process, Jenny was recognized by Washington Magazine as one of the 500 most influential people shaping policy in DC.
Jenny's long-standing commitment to access is evident in her accomplishments as the Chief Enrollment Officer at both University of Puget Sound and Bryn Mawr, and in admissions roles at Swarthmore and New York University School of Law. Her extensive service within the national higher education community includes a wide range of roles within the College Board, Association of College Counselors and Independent Schools, the United States Department of Education, and the Common App Board of Directors, serving as board president from 2007 to 2008. Jenny serves on the board of directors for the Posse Foundation and College Possible. She's an advisory board member for the National Education Equity Lab, and she currently serves on the American Council on Education's Washington Higher Education Secretariat. Jenny received a doctorate degree in higher education management from the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education, a Master's of Business Administration degree from New York University Stern School of Business, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from Swarthmore College. Please join us in welcoming Jenny Rickard.
Hello. Thank you so much, Zed and Brandon, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to President Smith for the very gracious and generous and quite surprising invitation to be the McCabe lecturer here at Swarthmore College. It's an incredible honor, and it's very meaningful to me, so I'm very grateful. And thank you all for being here. I arrived here at Swarthmore College 40 years ago, and it was a sight unseen. It was the same year that women's soccer had become a varsity sport, so 40 years ago, thanks to the impact of Title IX that's celebrating its 50th anniversary. It was also a time when Swarthmore College, believe it or not, admitted 40% of their applicants. So, does anybody? Yeah. So that's also why I'm here. So this is a button that we would wear. I played basketball at Swarthmore, and we wore this on game days my senior year of basketball. And I thought it appropriate to kick things off because it's literally a many games day here at Swarthmore College. It's also a game day personally for me because I am so grateful to Swarthmore for providing me with the education, the experience, the community, the relationships and friendships that really helped me define my purpose in my life and in my career. I hope my remarks today will convey the depth of my gratitude for Swarthmore's impact on me. So my plan today is to share with you why I came to Swarthmore, how Swarthmore helped me define my why, and how at Common App, every day is a game day when it comes to leveling the playing field of access to educational opportunity. So why Swarthmore? So this is my mom, and my mom grew up in the town of Swarthmore. And this quote of hers was really a sort of a personal mission, and it also underscored the value she placed on education. I grew up in Palo Alto, California, and I had every educational privilege with two parents who had been educators. And despite that fact of having every educational privilege and having the idea being that no one was concerned that I would go to college, it was whether I would go to graduate school. Regardless of that, I had a completely random college search and no methodology to it at all. And I remember my mother saying to me, well, there's, this college in Swarthmore, and she suggested I take a look at it, which was, of course, the mother's tactical error, which is, no way am I going to look at that. And I had never been there before, because we didn't have any family here at the time. But then by the time my senior year rolled around, and I was in my English class, these two guys, Tom Ramstaller and Kurt Kelty, got in early decision, and it was like the biggest news. And I thought, oh, Swarthmore, okay, other people know about it too. And in a random moment, I'd already applied to schools. I decided, I was worrying about whether I'd get in. And I decided, okay, I should add another school. And I added Swarthmore thanks to a February 1st deadline. And Swarthmore was the first school to send me an admission letter. And I thought, okay, this is a good time to actually read information about Swarthmore College from this Dean of Admissions, Robert A. Barr, Jr. And I did, and I started, the values of the college that were expressed really resonated with me. And the description of the culture of intellectual curiosity, appreciation and respect for differences, the importance of community, and using your education to help others really spoke to me. And one of the things when I was in admissions that I would regularly say to people is, if it feels right, that's what you should go with. Don't overthink this process. And so then, in May of my senior year, another colleague of mine, another classmate of mine, Jeff Parker, after I had deposited, said, hey, congratulations on going to Swarthmore. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, they study, it's just all they do is study there, and that's why they call it Swarthmore. It's really hard. In fact, people walk around with t-shirts that say, Swarthmore, anywhere else, it would have been an A. And I became incredibly panicked and nervous about going to Swarthmore or going to Swarthmore. And, but I want to really thank my mom, who passed away a month ago. With this, her personal mission, my brother and I were able to share with her that mission was accomplished. And she had a huge influence on my life. And initially thinking about how I wouldn't come here because of that, I'm here and grateful that I did. So 40 years ago, I arrived at Wharton and I had a quad, and I had roommates from Indiana and Massachusetts and New York, which I thought was incredible. And I also learned things like I called my beverage a Diet Pepsi. They called it either a soda, a pop, or a tonic. And that blew my mind. And one of my roommates, Liz Stevenson, who is here today, the lizard, she had come early to play field hockey, and which was also amazing because I grew up in California around Berkeley, Stanford, USC, UCLA. Those were Division I, high-powered athletics. And I thought, that's amazing that Liz is here early for field hockey. Not that it wasn't Liz. It was really exciting to be in a community with people from all over the country, all over the world, who had somehow been drawn to this place that was smaller than my high school. And I was also very grateful for the pass-fail first semester, as I worked to get my footing and also, overcome my mastery of the 5-paragraph essay. So I also learned from Liz that there was Division III in college athletics. Oh, I know. And after a month or so of being on campus, of not knowing what to do with all of my time outside of class, besides study, like Jeff Parker told me I needed to do, Liz convinced me that I should think about, trying out for the basketball team because she understood that I'd played basketball. And I'd been an athlete growing up thanks to my father, who was an All-American soccer player, and had been an athletics director, and we had moved out to Palo Alto so he could get his doctorate in what turned out to be physical education from Stanford University. But I had never known about the existence of a Division III in athletics. And my dad had worked to give me every opportunity. And I do remember as a kid, him vaguely talking about this concept of Title IX and how excited he was that it was going to give me many more opportunities. And I did have those opportunities. He made sure I had them. So this is my senior year basketball team. We don't have our game day buttons on, but it is the same team. And two of my teammates are here, Annie Fetter and Margaret Doherty-Arndt, who is also a McCabe Scholar from Delco. And I found that team, provided me with the discipline I needed to be able to make time for practice and for games, to help me balance my academics. I also found that the experience of being on a team with women from all over the country and all over the world who were engineers and philosophers and English majors and biologists and political scientists and historians and musicians and artists, that was just, they had different perspectives, opinions, and talents. It was transformative and inspiring for me because we all needed to practice together and work together towards a common goal. And that really was quite formative for me. And I loved that experience so much that I decided I would play softball in the spring, because I always wanted to have a sport, and then play soccer the following fall. And it also, a key part of it was starting to feel a real sense of belonging at Swarthmore. And that sense of belonging was really reinforced academically after my initial horror and fear of the academic environment my sophomore year. As I was preparing for this talk, I opened the trunk that I have moved from home to home but rarely go through. And one of the papers I found two papers that I'd saved from the college, and one of those was about nuclear-free zones, written for my cross-listed course in religion and physics, taught by Jerry Frost and Rush Holt, called Issues in Arms Control and Disarmament. And I saved that paper because I had honestly felt my brain growing as I researched and wrote that paper, and really probably the reason I got an A on it for the first time any time at Swarthmore. And I really started to feel that sense of belonging. And I'm showing this photo of McCabe Library, not only to underscore the importance of my academic experience here and in honor of the McCabe family, but also because it is actually literally the place where I came to the realization that I wanted everybody to have that same sense of belonging and community and opportunity and growth. And to distract myself, so one of the things, and I came to that realization in my junior year, that I wanted to be like Dean of Admissions, Robert A. Barr Jr., Dean Barr. My junior year, I was an RA in Willits, and I needed to find a place to study that no one could find me. And that was the 4th floor of McCabe. And it was pre-internet, pre-smartphone, and I needed to figure out some way to distract myself. So I would read this newspaper in the stacks right near my carrel. And that newspaper happened to be the Chronicle of Higher Education. And I would read it, and I loved the stories about these colleges, some of which I'd never heard of. But I liked seeing what was going on campuses. And in particular, for those who might remember, or ever seen it, they had these job ads in the back that were like these ads, like big boxes with descriptions. And I thought they were incredible. They seemed like incredible opportunities. And it was the first time I realized you could actually work in admissions, and they had entry-level jobs. And so my senior year, I subscribed to the Chronicle so I could get those ads in a timely fashion, and I applied. I must have sent 20 letters and resumes to 20 different schools, and there were no openings at Swarthmore. I didn't get any opportunities. So I did the next best thing, was to go work at JP Morgan on Wall Street and get my MBA at NYU. 3 years later, and I won't go into it, through a very random event, again, before the internet, I learned there was an admission opportunity at Swarthmore College, and the person said, you need to send a letter and resume to Bob Barr. And I thought, oh, Bob Barr. So I did. I sent the letter and the resume, and I had an interview, and then I got the job. And I came, and it was really, truly like coming home. And this is a photo of Bob's wife, Noni Barr, Phyllis Raymond, who I worked with, and Bob with me at Swarthmore Pizza 4 years ago. And working with Bob and Phyllis and others in the admission office at that time was also an incredible learning experience, because I really learned how admissions fits to a mission, and learning about how do you go about achieving that mission through outreach to students who might not otherwise think about going to Swarthmore or might be overlooked in the process. And I got to serve on the Delmarva McCabe committee and travel in Delaware to recruit students. And I also learned about the impact that a scholarship could have on students coming from first-generation college families or rural areas concerned about either cost or even accessibility of the institution for them, that they would be a much desired population on campus. Also during that time, I had the opportunity to coach Division III basketball. I became an assistant coach, and I worked with Dave Bronkema first as coach, and then Karen Borby, and I got to see firsthand, how students were experiencing the college. And I had so many, transformative and unforgettable learnings from that time, but the one that sticks with me the most is my trip to Arizona. It was my very first recruiting trip, and I was going to be going to a college fair in Tucson, and 3 schools that I would visit, my first high school visits. And I went to a brand new suburban school right outside of Tucson, where the counselor had actually contacted me to say she had an early decision candidate, and she would meet with me, and I did meet her. And then I went to a small independent school that had 26 students in their senior class, and 8 students showed up to meet with me. And then I went to the magnet school downtown, where I walked through the metal detector, I showed my ID, and a guard took me to the Career Center, where unfortunately the counselor couldn't help me because there was an emergency, and she had a caseload of 400 students. I then went to the college fair, where I saw the same 8 students from the independent school, the early decision student, and some others, but I didn't meet one student from that magnet school. And when you visit the high schools of this country, you experience the stark systemic inequities in terms of access to educational opportunity. So during the 6 years I worked at Swarthmore in admissions, I worked with students one by one to try to defy those inequities. I left Swarthmore for the higher education software industry because I literally wanted to create systems to enable individual colleges to identify inequities and create strategies to eliminate them. Then I got my dream jobs. I worked at Bryn Mawr College and University of Puget Sound, overseeing admissions, being a dean of admissions. And I worked within those communities with my colleagues and others to create policies and practices to create a more equitable process and diversify our community, so working across the institution. And now I'm at Common App, and our board and our team and our membership, college and universities, we work with school counseling community, policymakers, and researchers to what I call constructively disrupt the college admissions system to embed it with equity. So you heard about this. I feel very fortunate to be at an organization so aligned with my values and my purpose, and Swarthmore's, for that matter, that has the opportunity to create systemic change. That's our mission, and this is how we started. So, yes, the photocopier was the inspiration for Common App in 1975. It was a great idea and a grassroots effort of college admission officers and school counselors to leverage the latest technology of the time to create a common form. So students didn't need to type or handwrite their application form over and over again and then put it in the mail. Well, they still had to put it in the mail, but now they had to They could just photocopy it once, twice. And that was a period there in the late 70s, that thanks to the GI Bill and the Higher Ed Act of 1965, more students had begun to apply to more colleges, and public colleges, for the first time, had enrolled more students than private colleges. And students had started to look beyond their region, and competition had become pretty keen. So it was pretty amazing that colleges got together to support students and leave their self-interest behind in the spirit of promoting more access. These are the 15 original members, the founding members of the Common App, all private institutions, and in addition to streamlining the process for applicants, it was also an enrollment strategy for members to actually just get their names in front of more students outside their region. And note to Swarthmore, Bob Barr was a steering committee member of Common App in its very early years. And Common App has grown since then, as you heard. More than 1,000 colleges from private universities to now public universities and institutions outside the United States. We actually serve 47 of the 50 state public flagships and 1.3 million applicants every year, over a third of whom are first-generation college students. And we've grown in terms of the programming that we provide beyond the application itself. In 2019, Reach Higher, as you heard, the initiative started by former First Lady Michelle Obama to create a college-going culture, became part of Common App. Reach Higher works to inspire students who might not think college is in their reach to actually go for it and have that confidence. Common App works to make sure that students are successful doing so, and together we're really working to make a real difference in leveling the playing field of access to educational opportunity. Joining forces, as we did, was in part inspired by some human-centered design research that we had done with students, counselors, and admission officers 5 years ago. As part of that process, we asked them a simple question. What one word would you never use to describe the college admission process? Any words come to mind? Never use. What was that? Simple. Simple. Well, there were words like simple, logical, joyful, equitable. Never use those words. And, that's not only a serious problem from an access and equity perspective, but also a very sad state of affairs that the word joyful would not show up for students contemplating the possibilities of their future. So why is this the case? We know from user research at Common App, just with our own technology, that applicants and our focus groups, that applicants are most stressed out when they're using Common App, not when they're filling out information or writing their essays. It's when they're about to press the submit button. They feel that once they press that button, their lives up to that point are going to be judged, and they're most likely not worthy. They are going to be rejected. And that fear of rejection is profound. Think how hard it is for students who have been given every educational opportunity. And now think about how much harder it must be for those who have not. And it doesn't have to be that way. To provide some of the landscape of higher ed, one of the things that I realize that people don't always know is that the majority of colleges in the United States not only admit more than 25% of their applicants, but actually the majority admit the majority of their applicants. So here showing that 96% of colleges admit more than 25%. Swarthmore is a very rarefied group. So it means that the vast majority of undergraduates actually go to a nonprofit, fine institution that happens to admit the majority of their applicants. Yet, 100% of these students somehow think higher education is a scarce resource and out of their reach, and that they may not be worthy. So I mentioned the most stressful moment in Common App for many students is pressing the submit button. Our team responded to that information, our technology team, by enhancing the user experience, and 3 years ago, added some confetti after a student hits the submit button. One of our developers even added a celebrate button that you can see there, so applicants could press it over and over again. So we use a tool at Common App that helps us identify areas within the application where students might be getting hung up in the process. And if students are repeatedly clicking a particular part of the application, the technology calls it a rage click. So ironically, the #1 rage click in Common App is the celebrate button, underscoring the need for some relief or joy in this process. But joyful is a lot more than confetti, and we have a lot of work to do. I'm proud of the work that Common App has done to expand the membership and enhance our technology by moving from the photocopier to the cloud. But one of the reasons this process is so difficult for students is that while our technology has changed immensely, the application has not, and the process has not. Yet, and here's the form. This is from 1975 that the 15 founders used, and this is it today. It's strikingly similar, yet the students and the higher education landscape are incredibly different. And we're working on ways to change the application and the process with our constituents to constructively disrupt this system to enable more students to gain access to educational opportunity. And I want to share some of the changes we've made to some of the individual application questions that were on the common portion of the application. There's a common portion of the application, and then schools can have their own questions in another section, and we have more governance over the common portion. And we've made some of these changes to try to eliminate some of the inequities that we've seen. I also want to share some of the promising ways we are rethinking the process. I want to start with the school disciplinary question that asks students on an application whether they've been suspended or dismissed from school. In 2021, we removed this question from the common portion of the application because 100% of students were facing this question. And we had already known that from K-12 research that Black students are 4 times more likely than white students to be suspended from school. And using that data equity warehouse, the equity data warehouse that was mentioned before from the Gates Foundation, we were able to look at our own data and see that Black students using Common App were more than twice as likely to do that, to report a disciplinary action, and that students who had started but not even submitted an application were less, and had indicated a disciplinary infraction, were less likely to actually follow through on the process. So there was also the schools that people went to. About half of the schools in Common App would actually report a disciplinary infraction, but the other half just didn't even answer the question. And guess what? Black students and other underrepresented minority students were more likely to go to a high school that reported this information. So just think for a minute about a student who already thinks the odds are stacked against them, and then they get to this question. And so we decided we would remove it, enabling colleges and universities to still continue to ask that question on their application. But we also did so in a way sharing our data with our membership to let them know what the circumstances were and what the data show and how inequitable a practice it is. And I'm proud to say that now only 40% rather than 100% of Common App members ask that question, and I'm doubly proud to say that I know that Swarthmore has chosen not to ask that question anymore. And I also just want to give a shout out to the work that Jim Bach and his team have been doing in the admissions office here at Swarthmore to bring more students from very different backgrounds to this community. So another question we've been working on over the past several years is the evolution of the sex and gender identity question, and wanting students to be able to see themselves in the application while also enabling colleges and universities to be able to get the information that they need. In 2017, we added a text box because we were hearing from students that they wanted to be able to share their gender identity, but it was hard to figure out, well, how would we do that at this time? And there was also, among the membership, people saying we want male, female, that's what we want. Just those two identities. And we added this text box, and it's an optional question. And about 4% of students, as recently as 2 years ago, would answer that question. We added some more, made it more explicit based on work with students and our membership. And we added some additional questions about pronouns and how students wanted to identify gender in sort of a text box, not text box, but a checkbox. And 97% of the applicants have responded to this. And next year, we already announced this to the membership, but next cycle, we're changing the legal sex question to add an additional male, female, and then an X for another legal sex. So that is, I think, something that's really significant, and we've heard positive feedback all around for doing that, but wanting to be out front on many of those kinds of changes. So those are some of the application changes that we've made that show the power of making some small changes that can have a big impact on people. And now I want to share a little bit more about how we've tried to create more equity of representation of different types of institutions with Common App. To be a member of Common App, you need to be a nonprofit nonprofit undergraduate degree granting, properly accredited institution. And in 2019, we did an analysis of our membership to determine the representation of minority-serving institutions, such as historically Black colleges and universities and Hispanic-serving institutions, among others. And we found that they were significantly underrepresented in our membership. So 18% we had and we were looking at parity. So we had 41% of institutions that were not identified as minority-serving institutions compared to institutions to the whole population of non-minority-serving institutions, and only 18% of the total population of minority-serving institutions. Through a grant from the Lumina Foundation, we've been able to do really thoughtful, good work, close work with different minority-serving institutions, and have been able to increase that percentage of MSIs to 27%, but we're still just in the beginning of that to create more parity across the different institutional types within Common App. And so I mentioned various aspects of the admissions process that we wanted to change, and I have the results of 2 pilots that we've been conducting to try to flip the script on existing processes and provide more agency for students. So one of the areas of inequities that we see just from a data perspective are related to private scholarships, so not the McCabe scholarship or not a federal Pell Grant or other kind of institutionally federal or state funded scholarship, but something like from the Coca-Cola Foundation, something like that. Believe it or not, students at upper income levels on average receive 130% more private scholarship aid than those in the bottom quartile of incomes. And we partnered with Scholarship America to basically, we're doing outreach to students within the Common App who meet scholarship criteria to directly say, here is a scholarship that you are actually eligible for, and here is how you go to apply for it. And we've been excited about 2 of the scholarships through Scholarship America. One, a technology company looking for computer science graduates, has able to double the number of underrepresented students in their awardees. And another scholarship was able to increase that by 50%. And we're looking to see how we can scale that, on a much bigger level. This next one I want to share is exciting to me, because remember those slides I showed you about colleges admitting most applicants and most applicants thinking they won't get admitted? One of the ways we're working to solve that disconnect is through a pilot called direct admission, and it's modeled off what some states have been doing. Basically, based on a student's self-reported academic information within the Common App profile, where you can provide that information, so something like GPA, We are reaching out to students in 6 states with 6 partner institutions, and based on the state that they're in, because we're just giving them information about a school in their state and their self-reported academic information, letting them know through an email that comes from me, which I'm really excited about. It's like being a dean of admissions again, and the dean or director of admission at that partner institution, letting them know that based on their self-reported information, they will be admitted to this particular school if they just press submit. We've been working with one of the institutions, shared their information recently, Montclair State in New Jersey. We sent 18,000 emails out in January. Montclair State had, I think, about 3,000 of those emails were sent on behalf of them. They had over 250 students say that they actually applied to Montclair State, and 30 enrolled. And we did a random control trial to understand what the impact of the outreach was compared to what they might have done already. And students were nearly 3 times more likely to apply to the institutions in our pilot than if they had not gotten the email from us. We found that it was Black and Latinx students who were more likely to respond to the offer. So I'm excited about the promise of that, and we're trying to figure out how do we scale that, and also how do we continue that research to make sure that it's having the intended impact and students are successful at those institutions, because that's the primary, absolutely paramount to us. So you might ask, what's the impact of all this work that you've been doing? Have we closed any of Common App's own equity gaps? And you'll see in this graph, over the past 7 years, the number of underrepresented minority applicants in Common App has grown at twice the rate of their counterparts in the past 7 years. A lot of that is due to the expansion of our membership and adding more public institutions into the mix. And while our equity gap with race and ethnicity is closing, we have an 8 percentage point gap in terms of Latinx applicants compared to high school graduates. There's also an income gap, and this shows that students from the lowest income quintile zip codes have increased over that same period of time at nearly twice the rate of students in the highest income quintile zip codes. And I can hear my Swarthmore colleagues saying, well, of course, Jenny, because that number in the lower income quintile is small, so it is increasing at a faster rate. And that is absolutely true, because the income gap remains very significant. So this shows our applicants to 1,000 colleges and universities who are representative of students attending 4-year colleges in the United States still disproportionately reside in America's wealthiest communities. So 55% in the top income quintile, 6.7% in the lowest income quintile. And that takes me back to Tucson, Arizona. That first recruitment trip and the disparity of opportunity that young people have based on their zip code. So how do we change the systems that we live and work in? Systems that were not originally designed with equity in mind. Speaking of Title IX again, I'm reminded of the other paper that I saved from Swarthmore that was in my trunk. This was a very helpful assignment I've been given to do the McCabe lecture, to remember the papers that I wrote. And it was my final project for Professor Catherine Morgan's oral history class my senior year. And it was an interview with Eleanor Pete Hess about the evolution of Swarthmore women's athletics since 1957. And she was the first women's athletic director at Swarthmore. And she talked about the double-edged sword. So here I am, as a student at Swarthmore, enjoying being able to play 3 varsity sports for women. And this quote just reminds me that it's so much not only about the changes we make, but how we implement, systemic change, and how long it can take for that systemic change to have the desired effect. And I know she would have been very proud that my friend Karen Borby served as athletic director here. And that brings me to current events and the potential reversal of efforts to create systemic change when it comes to equity of opportunity. With oral arguments at the Supreme Court coming on Monday about 2 cases challenging affirmative action and the use of race as one factor in college admissions, it's really timely to be talking about alternative ways to expand access and create diverse college communities. And at Common App, as I've mentioned, we're working to constructively disrupt the current system that has posed significant barriers, as you can see, to underrepresented students gaining access to higher education, and it's been for a long time. And Swarthmore helped me to find my purpose to address inequities of opportunity, whatever the size and where I see them and can affect them. And my challenge to all of you is how you can increase equity in the systems you are part of. At Common App, we found that changing just one question or requirement can make a huge difference. And what's a change to a system that you can make? And today is a game day, so to do that. So thank you so much, and I welcome any questions you might have. Yes.
Pete Coley here.
Hi, Pete.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
About 18 years ago, the late great Karen Tidmarsh at Bryn Mawr College mentioned a book that had been published then recently, Where the Boys Aren't. It was about declining interest amongst high school boys in applying to colleges. I saw some articles in the Times recently about that trend continuing. Could you please speak to that question?
Yes, I can tell you that, we see the data that shows that there are more women in post-secondary education than there are men. And in the Common App applicant pool, it's about 53% women and 47% men. So it's, that's what I can speak to. It's a societal, there's so many issues surrounding access to higher ed, not only the past 3 years where we've seen declining enrollment just in general and declining enrollment in 4-year colleges as well as 2-year colleges, the rhetoric around the questioning value of a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree. And I could speak a lot about that. So, is there any particular aspect?
As to what reasons you'd see for that. Why the applicants have gone down. One can say, of course, it's wonderful having more women apply to 4-year schools, but why are fewer men interested in applying?
Yeah, that I don't have as much information about that, Peter. Although I can share a moment when I was working in admissions, and not as many women were going to college, and then all of a sudden there was concern that now, oh my goodness, there might be more women than men, but there wasn't actually really that much concern that there had been no women. I think it's a concern. It's a societal concern, and I do think a lot of it is the rhetoric about the value of education, and I have not read all the literature about that, Peter. Yes, Deb.
Jenny, this is really fascinating. You've talked a lot about systems and practices in the admissions process. Do you feel that there's any one particular practice that is especially inequitable or the most inequitable inherently?
That's a great question. I would say, not to give colleges and universities a pass, is the K-12 inequities in the K-12 system are significant. And I think that the fact that we don't have a very good K through 16 system, that we don't necessarily work together, as much as we could, having secondary schools and post-secondary schools really inform each other and communities, that they're sort of in silos. I think that is something. The other piece that's, I guess, it's not inequitable, but it's really confusing to people, is sticker price and college costs, right? And that is something that can have a chilling effect on people who think, oh my gosh, it costs so much. But many schools do have generous aid to support students, such as Swarthmore, right? But people look at it like it's potentially not going to be financially possible. And I think the pricing methodology, having worked in admissions, I started in 1989 here at Swarthmore, and the whole idea of the quote-unquote Chivas Regal effect, that even though it may not cost as much to educate a student at your school, you should still charge a lot, because that means people will think you're a good school. And that led to these practices in financial aid of sort of the high tuition, high discount, which means let's charge a high tuition, but then let's discount it a lot because people actually really can't afford that at this particular institution. And, Swarthmore is, incredibly generous and has the resources, to be able to provide need-based, aid and McCabe scholarships. And a lot of other schools don't, but that's sort of what was happening, and I think that's ultimately been what is challenging higher ed now and challenging colleges and universities, because people are equating the cost, of a four-year degree that can be over $300,000 with less understanding about what the return on that might be. There's one right there.
Common App is in the data sharing business, and I was wondering, do you have a team that ensures that those data you share are not being misused?
Yeah, thank you. So we share data with, we just recently developed, it was 2 years ago, that we developed our data warehouse. And we have data, we don't share the names or personally identifiable information of students at all. And we're actually very, very careful, and it's our greatest asset is our student information, and we don't share that. And I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but from a research perspective, we eliminate all the personally identifiable information about individuals.
Do you ensure that in your network that there are no way misusing these data about all these young people, even the schools?
Yeah, I would say, well, we have, as part of being a member of Common App, you have to adhere to particular, rules, and there's a service agreement. I'm not aware of any issues, but that would be a serious issue if someone were misusing it. Right there.
Oh, hi, Jenny.
Oh, hi, Eric. I don't know why I called on him.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different tact here. And, as you know, there's enormous stress and pressure on high school students these days. And it seems to be exacerbated by the college admissions process. And Common App obviously provides a simplification and easier vehicle to apply to colleges, which I think also sometimes encourages students to apply to more colleges, which decreases the access and the admit rate. And so I'm wondering, are there things that you at Common App can do to work with your member schools to try to tamp down the pressure, to have a certain set of policies or practices that colleges ask for so that students feel a sense of uniformity? Or are there things that Common App can do to try to reduce the pressure on students?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. That's a big focus of ours, is how do we work with our members to help them understand some of the pressure they may be creating. So an example would be with our new data warehouse. One of the things we haven't been able to help our members with is where are students getting hung up in their part of the process, in their additional essays or whatever it might be, and who are the students that are potentially opting out of the process, who've already started a Common App, but because they get to these other questions that have a chilling effect for a student, or they're not, they can't proceed with it, let our members know. Like, here's some best practices if you want this kind of information and how to make it more uniform. That's one of the things we're about to do is that form that has been around forever, we're looking at how do we break it up and make it more common in pieces, but have it be that a student only has to answer that question once, regardless of where it goes, but have members be able to take those blocks of information and include it in their own application. I realize this is probably a very confusing conversation for people who don't work in college admissions or know the Common App. But yeah, we're working on that, of like how to make it more common and support students through the process too. Yes, there's in this last row. Oh, yeah, him and then, yeah, green top.
Thank you. You mentioned the Supreme Court decisions around affirmative action. Is there anything the Common App is planning to do if affirmative action is struck down and colleges can't explicitly account for race in admissions? Is there anything that the Common App is planning to do to help colleges, support colleges and still being able to build diverse classes?
Yes, there is, and we don't know yet certainly what the decision will be, and we don't know what the ruling will be in terms of what the impact will be on, like, an application, for example. So will race and ethnicity still be a question that can be asked, right? We started a couple of years ago a process with our members to try to understand more context about students and their environments that go beyond we have a list where students can enter what their activities are, and we have work experience and family responsibilities are in it, but it doesn't really get to what the heart of family responsibilities might be. And so we have 12 institutions that are working with us to pilot what we're calling a context inventory that will get at more at a student's, how they're spending their time in ways that the application does not necessarily surface itself, and being more explicit about how many hours do you spend, or do you spend more than 6 hours on translating information for family members, or taking care of another family member, or without Wi-Fi, or whatever it might be. And so we're piloting that to see what kind of information that provides to the admission offices, and then also looking at it in context of all the other data that we would have about the applicant. So we'll be working with our members certainly over the course of this year to make sure that we're being able to provide information to support them in their missions of enrolling a diverse student body. But it's disheartening to see what's happened in states of like California and Michigan that have eliminated that affirmative action, basically, in the use of race in the admission process, and to see the composition of the student bodies that they have that's dropped dramatically from underrepresented minority students. So the gentleman there.
Do you have data on the mean or median number of schools that students using Common Application apply to?
The number?
Yeah. Do you have a number?
Yeah, the median is 5. And the mean, I think, is like 6 something. We had, one of the things people don't know is that we limit the number of applications you can apply to 20. And I think it's 2% of applicants apply to 20 schools. The vast majority apply to under 10. And but it seems like people apply to 100. So we get that a lot, and we say, well, I actually limit it to 20. And interestingly enough, that limit was placed when Common App went online in 1998, before it was as much of a frenzy and before we had so many colleges and universities. That mean number is an interesting one, and the median as well, because we add new colleges every year. And so then there are more choices within the Common App environment for students to be able to apply to. So the number's been going up, but not as significantly as one might expect. So for example, we added Texas A&M and University of Texas at Austin are new members this year, which is adding a lot of different students into the mix who have other choices that they want to use Common App for. Here down front here. Sorry, I'm making you go there and then, yeah. Or either way.
Thank you. Hi, Jenny. It's Lois Sash, class of 90. We worked together a little bit a few years ago.
Hi.
With admissions. How are you? My question is actually going back to one of the slides that you showed that discussed the disciplinary action question. And the reason this is in the forefront, my daughter worked with the Office of Public Defense on an internship this summer with the state of Delaware, and they were working on legislation that she was personally involved in, a student's perspective, which was called Check the Box. Mm-hmm. And so it completely expanded the conversation of Common App versus states' rights, national lobbying, which I know that you've been incredibly in the forefront with the Department of Education. I guess my question is, how does the Common App find parity with states' rights and individual applications or individual legislative needs that might supersede or might create this conundrum between student privacy, student right, and the disparity that the application may not fall in line with state guidelines, which puts the application into that area of what are students giving up and what are they protected, and how do you as Common App protect those rights as well as advocate for students and the universities. It sort of puts you in the...
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I have found just being at Common App and in this role, it's our biggest challenge, but it's also our biggest superpower, is the fact that we work with applicants, we work with school counselors, and we work with colleges and universities, and that our job is to try to thread that needle, if you will, and see what we can do with the equity imperative that we have. So I think what I'm hearing, because I wasn't as familiar with all of those details, is that there's legislation in Delaware requiring asking about those questions. It's asking about juvenile misdemeanors, and asking about criminal background, right. So that's a big state thing. Correct, yeah, so. Right, we eliminated the criminal history question back in 2018 for the same reasons with school discipline in terms of the inequity and the disproportionate impact on Black applicants. And what we found, though, we do have states that require it, and they are able to ask it on their member page. And it's a big question, for us as a membership association, and how do you balance, legislative needs that a public institution would have that require something that the common portion is not including. And it's part of the work, and it's part of how do we use our data at Common App to be able to shine a light on the differences in different state practices and what kind of impact might that be, and collaborating with those forums, but it's of those in those forums. But it's a challenge. It's one of the I'm going to use the word things. I couldn't think of the other word, and I'm at Swarthmore. One of the things that we have to contend with is how do we make sure that we're serving students and not underserve others. So we want to be able to have the reach that we do so that we can serve a variety of students. And there may be some requirements that are legal requirements in a state that we will enable a member to be able to ask that. But then we're also still being able to work with those students in other ways. So to be continued, it's a big conversation, and it only gets bigger. But thank you. Yes.
Hi, Jenny. I'm a first-generation low-income student, and I'm really interested in all of your thoughts regarding equity in the admissions process. Just recently, Amherst announced that they will no longer consider legacy status within their admissions process, and I know that Swarthmore and many other quote-unquote elite colleges still consider it in the process. And as someone at the forefront of the college's admissions process, and especially conveying information to the colleges, I was wondering about your stances and thoughts on legacy admissions and its connection to advancing equity.
Yeah, that's an interesting question too. I would say that one of the things when we think about this affirmative action ruling as well is what impact do programs like legacy admissions have on an institution's ability to actually enroll a more diverse student body. I have found that it really varies from institution to institution how they even implement a legacy program. So it's hard for me to make a sweeping statement about it. But I think it's imperative, given the environment for institutions, to see who is not enrolling because there is a certain number, potentially not a certain number, but benefits for legacy applicants. So I would leave that to the institution to really take a look at its environment and its world and what its mission is. Okay, I guess we have one more question, and there's someone back there.
Hi. My question is about the equity in the application process itself. My daughter applied to the UK the same time that she was applying here. One essay, one application fee, 5 colleges. That's it. There was no hindrance to application. It was a £25 fee that was, I guess, split again amongst the colleges. I don't even know how. Where do you see when applicants in the U.S. who don't apply, who can't avail the fee waiver, they're kind of not coming into that. Do you see inequities in then who applies, and also in the supplemental essays, kids who are coming from big high schools who can't get the support for the creative essay, the Y essay, et cetera, et cetera? Do you think that streamlining and flattening all of that will increase equity in who applies to elite colleges, as well as, non-selective colleges or selective colleges?
Yeah, interesting question. And one of the things that the dynamic there, I'm very familiar with UCAS in the UK, and it's a very different model, right, of an organization and sort of a mandate, right, a legislative mandate. And it's a very different admission process and higher education system. And what I can tell you is one of the things we've done this year, but we haven't seen the results, is try to streamline the fee waiver process, because students can get a fee waiver by just letting us know on the application now more easily. And 50% of Common App colleges don't require a fee. So I do see that more students are potentially not applying to as many colleges because of application fees. At the same time, lower income students using Common App, and then half of our schools can apply to 20 with a fee waiver, right, with one one fee waiver. So I absolutely see application fees as a barrier. And I see potential essay questions depending upon what institutions are doing. Potentially, I have not, and again, this is our next area of inquiry, is like, how do we help our members look at the questions that they're asking and how they may be preventing a student from completing the process. And I also, as I pointed out before, most schools admit most students, and the Common App itself, for many of those schools, doesn't include an essay, and doesn't include, some of the other may not require recommendations. So it's a different experience for everybody. But yes, what you described, finances are certainly a barrier, and I hope I understood your question okay. And I guess that was the last question. But there's okay, Liz. Wait.
How does the Common App work with their members in terms of trying to get them in sync with what you see as your values, your priorities in leveling the playing field? I mean, you referred to the sharing of data, for example, in the school disciplinary, when the Common App made the decision you were going to eliminate that box, and you shared the data with the colleges in the hopes, I guess, of them wanting to eliminate that from their own portion. So is there a continuing program of data sharing with your members to try to encourage them or get them to come along with the Common App as you proceed in a direction to ensure more equitable access to students around the country?
Yes, the data warehouse I mentioned again, just 2 years ago, launched it, and we have 4 data scientists now, whereas 2 years ago we had 1, and 3 years ago we didn't have any. So it's a new territory for us, and I can say that it has been the most powerful tool for us, and that's what I see as our sort of the next venture as we continue to look at different practices in college admissions. To be able to inform people with data has made a huge difference. The school discipline question, I had colleagues, from member colleges and universities concerned that they wanted to remove the school discipline question, but they weren't sure their communities would want that, who were able to use the data that we provided to have conversations on campuses. So that's just the beginning of, honestly, what we've been able to do now that we have access to that information. So thank you, and thank all of you very much. So.